Good evening to you all, tēnā koutou, and a very warm welcome to this Meet the Candidates online event in Golden Bay. And I'm David Bartle, co-hosting tonight with Joanna Santa Barbara, and we're both from the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum, which is a community group who facilitate local action to help address the climate crisis. And we've organised these meetings in partnership with the Tasman Environmental Trust, which is a conservation group dedicated to working across the whole of the top of the south. And in fact, they do quite a lot in Golden Bay, as you most probably know. So we're hosting these meetings with candidates from every ward and also with the mayoral candidates. And Joanna will start us with a karakia, please. Thank you.
This karakia refers to our gathering together, seeking knowledge for understanding, and enjoins us to have purpose in all that we do. Stand tall, be strong, let's show respect for each other. E te whānau hui, whaia te matauranga kia marama, kia whai take ngā mahi katoa. Tu maya, tu kaha. Aroha atu, aroha mai. Tato ia tato katoa.
Thank you. So welcome everybody. And we're hosting these Meet the Candidates events because we think the council has a really vital role on local action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to the changes we have ahead of us. And we're going to invite our councillors to explain how you will help our local communities to respond to this worsening crisis. This is a crucial time for Aotearoa as we move towards 2030, the date by which time we've agreed to almost halve our emissions. At the same time, we're fighting a biodiversity crisis with loss of habitat, destruction of invasive species, destruction by invasive species, and increasing climatic impacts. We wish to hear how council candidates here tonight intend taking on these unprecedented challenges once you're elected. A few words about our procedure. So we'll run through to 8:30, and in this first hour, we have some pre-prepared questions, which we've compiled in collaboration with the Tasman Environmental Trust, who have co-hosted some of the meetings. And the candidates here tonight have received these pre-prepared questions beforehand. And we're going to ask each candidate to respond in 2 minutes to each question. And we know that's very short, but this would allow us to get questions from the floor. Because there's 3 of you tonight, if you go a little over 2 minutes, that's fine, but please keep it to the point. And respect the fact that the participants have come on to this meeting because they're particularly wanting to hear your views on the topics of climate action and biological diversity. And if you don't want to address a question, that's fine. And we are recording this session together with the other sessions, which will be available on the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum website. And in the last half an hour or so tonight, we will invite candidates to address questions from the floor. And the way we'd like to take these, please, is if people attending this meeting would like to type a question in the chat box, we'll pick them up from there. So the chat box is at the bottom of the screen, and you can type a question in there at any time. And so tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Quinn Lake and Celia Butler, and also to James Wolfenden Duval. Welcome to you, and thank you for standing for the council. We really appreciate that.
Hello, everyone.
I'm going to now ask Joanna to put the first question to you, please.
Gladly. In this question, we'd like you to tell us who you are and what are your outstanding credentials in the arena of action on climate and biodiversity. And we will start with Celia.
tēnā koutou katoa. Yeah, I'm happy to be here tonight, but I have been told our answers have to be pithy, so I will do my best. One of my credentials is that I actually voted against the adoption of a climate report that was put to Tasman District Council about a year ago because I was unhappy with how was really that it simply wasn't meaty enough and didn't reflect where we should be. As a result of that, the Tasman Climate Forum has actually improved and is building itself up quite well. I was the chair of the governance group for the Tasman Biodiversity Strategy, which has come to fruition, has been adopted by council and has been given a lot of approval. I am chair of the Native Habitats Tasman group for council. I was chair of Forest and Bird before I became a councillor. I'm a member of Friends of Cobb and I look after Painsford. So I take a very deep interest in all matters to do with climate change and biodiversity, protection of biodiversity.
You do indeed, Celia. Thank you. Now to Quinn.
Gosh, that's a hard one to follow, Celia. Yeah.
I am in council.
No, that's right. Yeah, so I'm Quinn. I have some training in regenerative agriculture, which I spent quite a bit of time voluntarily when I was working, running a business in dental technology, actually, and I had a couple of friends that were shepherds. So I loved farming life, and I got into regenerative agriculture with a company called Integrity Soils, which was very good. And then I came to Golden Bay to do the first sustainability course. So permaculture and organics and sustainability. I've been involved with ongoing actions like trapping and beach cleanups. I was a scuba diver for many years, so we used to do all around the wharves and things in Wellington. We'd do beach cleanups, and I've done tree planting up where you are, actually, Joanna, up on your with Annie. So
Really?
I planted a lot of trees with her. And food production, and so I'm not a superstar yet, but a curious participant in health and wellbeing for all life and ecosystems. I've been involved with different things around the bay here as well, different groups. Yeah, so that's me in a nutshell.
Pretty good. Okay, and now James.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is James Wolfen-Duval. The roles I've been involved with in regard to climate, biodiversity, including being a hands-on person and in management positions previously employed by the St Edmundsbury Borough Council in the UK. And I came from the UK to New Zealand in the late 90s. My roles included being part of a team responsible for collection and disposal of landfill areas within an urban and a rural environment, including how recycling green waste processed and returned to the public. I was also recruited by the council to be an inspector of the Ministry of Transport within the council. This including being responsible for all types of vehicles with regarding to standards and in particularly emissions. This was, everything from ambulances, taxis, public cars, trucks, anything and everything regarding safety and emissions. My passion with regard to climate change is I've been a hands-on person, so I've been out to the Great Barrier Reef twice and dived in order to find out what the differences in 2 10-year periods. I've also travelled between Canada, America, and done the entire through Central America down through South America. So I've got intimate knowledge of people and climates with regard to tropical forests, etc. And I believe that kind of experience along with my first 21 years in farming, being brought up on a farm, dairy farm, gives me a really good sound experience and knowledge based on these challenges that we're now facing. And if there's one thing I would like to add at this point, I would say that all of us here tonight, if we are not doing anything else, I don't know who may have seen, but I would thoroughly recommend watching a documentary, which is about an hour 25, called Kiss the Ground, if no one has seen it. That will solve more problems than you would ever give credit for if you look at it with regard to.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So I'll move to the next question now. So we're going to ask each of the candidates some specific questions, and we hope you will give us the answers which will help guide the council as we go forward. So the first question is on the climate crisis. So the climate crisis clearly requires urgent and significant changes in how we live. We'd like you to please describe a climate relevant change that you would launch through the council in the next 3 years. A specific change that you would launch. It could be in waste, in urban intensification, or in energy, or something else. So I would like you to do that. Now I'm going to ask Quinn to speak first, but somebody is making a noise with a spoon of some sort. So I don't know who that is. Is that you, Joanna?
No. Oh, I think Martin Milligan has just muted himself. That's
fine.
helpful. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Martin. So Quinn, could you pick that question up, please?
I will, thank you. So I have a particular passion for palliative care and for dignified end of life. And something which I am very interested in bringing into being via council is to have dedicated natural burial spaces. Now, I know we do presently have some, however, the practice of shallow burials isn't being followed, and the concept is where nothing is introduced to the soil that will pollute or interfere with the natural environmental processes. So there's a lasting legacy of regenerating natural bush, so offsetting emissions and in some cases even stabilising land. So in helping biodiversity through regenerating bush. The bodies are not embalmed, dressed in natural fibres, buried in shrouds or certified untreated sustainable wood or woven fibre coffins. Shallow plots, which is the key, are at a depth where the soil is the most active and planted with a tree of the family or the individual's choosing. And eventually that site will return to native bush. So the plot markers are biodegradable and everything's recorded by council. There's no decorations, and it will become, the site itself will become a living memorial to those interred there. And I have personal knowledge of this practice and process through both of my parents, who were buried in the Makara cemetery in their natural burial area. And so we've had now 4 years to watch this, the bush. And I think it's actually quite beautiful and it's very successful. So yeah, that's my, I would love to see that. Thank you.
Very impressive. Thank you very much. So James, could you describe, please, a climate relevant change that you would launch through the council in the next 3 years? Yep.
I would love to. This is one that's a little bit of an old chestnut to some people. We're talking Waimea Dam. The Waimea Dam is the biggest one in the last 20 years in New Zealand. And so that is quite a feat in itself. Now, I'm not going to go over the costs and the rest of it like some people are concerned with, because let's be honest, we are at that point where we're not going to go back. This is not open to debate. We need to go forward with a finished project. However, I know hydropower has been looked at, and it's been put on a little bit of a back burner at the moment. But talking with people in the know, with everything else, I am proposing not only to look, but to go forward with hydropower. And the first thing you would probably say to me, like a lot of other people, is that this is not practical and the ratepayer does not need to be burdened with anything else. My main proposal is when we do it, because I have been approached with private funding to the tune, which is more than enough for the generator to be placed in, etc. This is one option. The council can also bear the same cost if they want to have total control of it. But in this day and age, it's is it going to be through the council or is it going to be privately funded? And I would like to look in order to make all the ratepayers shareholders in this, so all 60,000 of us, and give us a return back. But energy is really important. I believe hydropower, like I think we have a total of about 85 hydropowers, and it supplies the greatest part of all our needs. I think it's a lot more easy on the eye than wind farms, etc. So I would advocate to pursue that policy. It would not only fulfill a local need, but it could also go ahead and do a national justice for what we need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Celia, you're on the council. What would you do that would be different and bring a climate relevant change to launch in the council in the next 3 years?
I think that we have to cut emissions. That's the driving and most urgent thing that council needs to do. I'm confining my answer to Golden Bay. I wasn't sure whether or not, because you're having a separate Golden Bay Zoom, whether you want us to simply talk about Golden Bay or whether to talk about the region as a whole. So I have decided that I'm going to talk about a Golden Bay issue, and that is to get a viable public transport to and from Golden Bay, which ultimately would be electric. That's my dream, and 3 years, I think maybe it could be realised. At the very least, public transport to and from Golden Bay. This will really reduce emissions because the numbers of cars travelling and vans travelling back and forth over the Takaka Hill, I just can't imagine how much emissions that puts out.
Very good.
Yeah, sorry.
Good. Do you know that you're aware, are you, that the council has actually invested in buses that are fully electric, which are going to go as far as Motueka?
Precisely. They're going as far as Motueka. So there's a big blank space when it comes to public transport for Golden Bay. I think that investment is necessary, and investment by local government as well as government will bring private investment. The sooner we invest, the less cost we have in the long run when it comes to climate change. I would like to see council fund the carbon zero business for climate action more than it is at present, because this is the sort of thing where once we get the ball rolling with government and local body investment, private investment will follow. So yes, my little project, my project is public transport to and from Golden Bay, and with an eye on it becoming electric.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So Joanna, you'll turn to ask some questions, please.
Did we have James on that question?
Did I not ask James? I apologise, James. I'm so sorry.
You did. You had me, yeah, and I spoke on.
I think you did speak. Yes, I think so.
I'm so sorry.
Quinn, James, and Celia. So you can't escape that easily, Joanna.
My mistake. Sorry about that.
Don't worry.
Okay, yes. Right. Well, I'm picking up from your theme, Celia, with my next question, pointing out that about 90% of Tasman's carbon dioxide emissions are from transport, and to turn to the candidates to ask, what will you specifically do to help reduce transport emissions, building on what TDC has already done? And I will turn to James for the first answer on this.
Yeah, happy to give that answer. I don't believe personally on the CO2 emissions. I haven't seen the paperwork with regard to 90%, but you have to realise I've been involved with transport for 51 years. And being an inspector of those emissions, I've actually got an innate knowledge that I don't believe many other people have. We are not talking about older vehicles. I'm talking about, I was speaking with a gentleman the other day who just got another new vehicle now on Euro 6 standard, which is a very high standard from Europe. The air, the exhaust gas that comes out of that exhaust pipe is cleaner than the air is going in. So that tells us something. There's good and bad in that. I'm saying you can actually breathe the exhaust. I don't think anyone in their right mind would want to, but we're gone from Euro 6, there are now Euro 7 vehicles available. Along with cars with catalytic converters, with regard to reducing emissions, I really feel there are better ways, even than electric, with alternative fuels and whatever, in reducing our carbon footprint. The whole problem is, we can do whatever we can do, and I would encourage all of us to do it within Golden Bay. I'm all for reducing emissions. Don't get me wrong. I'm not living in denial of the problem. I'm just saying, if you look at the 2015 Paris Accord, you will see that the three biggest emitters of emissions are, unfortunately, China, America, and India. Now, unfortunately, America they withdrew from that accord. Now, the biggest emitters of emissions in the world, I mean, I can show you, but, you know, we're looking at, most of them are petrochemical companies. And I honestly believe, okay, they supply us with fuels, but they should actually come to the table and be made to pay X amount. This has gone on now for as long as my life has been and more. And I mean, if you look at, we'll take the Saudi Arabian situation. In the last 55 years, they have produced 60 billion tons of emissions and gases. 60 billion. Okay, that is severe. Have a look at our footprint in New Zealand, and we're
James,
at 1%.
I'm going to interrupt you and ask you to bring those points to a conclusion in just half a minute, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, well, I think I've made my point really. So I will leave it at that and let the next candidate have an opinion.
Thank you.
We'll turn to Celia now. Obviously very thoughtful about transport emissions.
Yeah, I'm going to talk once again. I'm going to talk about Golden Bay. We have to reduce vehicle use, and I certainly hear James's points about the quality of the engines and that type of thing, and I'm sure that is a factor. In fact, something that you'd probably be able to tell me about is that I understand that some petrol cars, that they have a certain speed at which they make the least amount of, give off the least amount of emissions, and it's not necessarily the slowest speed they can go. So that's an interesting topic, but that's another topic. So reducing vehicle use is important or essential to reduce emissions. We can also lower the speed, which is just along the lines of what I was just mentioning before in the topic about petrol engines. Lowering speeds, generally speaking, I understand, will reduce emissions. So that is will come out of the speed management plan, which council will be undertaking early next year. And my intention, should I be elected, would be to contribute as much as I can to getting reduced speeds as widely across the bay as possible, maybe not popular, to make it easier, improve conditions for walking and cycling in Golden Bay. And it has been clearly said by the walking and cycling people, the society, that conditions within Takaka Township itself are pretty much okay, but it's getting in and out of Takaka from the little settlements which lie between Takaka and our rural areas. So, for example, Motupipi, Pohara, Rangihaiata, those places. So improving, putting some cycleways where we can, improving the shoulders on the roads so that cyclists can feel safer. And small investments such as getting a footpath down the north end of Motupipi Street so that people can continue to walk around easily and safely, walk around the triangle around Takaka. Funding is available for these things through Waka Kotahi and other sources, and I'm hopeful that the Motupipi footpath will come to fruition next year. So we have to invest in improving conditions for walking and cycling in pinch points where necessary that will make the difference for people to not have to drive in and out of town.
Thank you, Celia. And now Quinn.
Yeah, thank you. I follow on from what Celia was saying, that, you know, cycleways are great and for well-being, and I fully support them. And I've been a cyclist for many years, you know, but from a practical life management sort of point of view, it's limited as far as, you know, if you live in Collingwood, or if you've got a family and you're doing a big shop, or collecting sort of maintenance items for projects and that sort of thing. So, and, you know, cycling on the faster, narrow sort of rural roads, it can be really frightening. So really fine-tuning our trip reduction, shortening the distances that we are using cleaner burning fuels, and doing ride sharing and carpooling, and the more efficient vehicles, sort of focusing on maintenance and having things going well. I have a real concern for electric vehicles. I really do wonder if we are creating a worse problem with the combustible batteries, you know, disposal of them, and the destruction in the lithium mines. And are we creating an economic sort of sinkhole where we're swapping one issue for another more expensive one? And I do have a real concern that we can't just go all out with electric vehicles, and we're building and backing them with more infrastructure for those vehicles. And then if a better, cleaner burning fuel, or an alternative comes along which isn't environmentally destructive and expensive to replace batteries, can these vehicles that we are investing in, for public transport and private, can they be cost effectively converted? You know, is there a way to adapt their primary fuel source in the future? I also have a concern that it's the vulnerable people, you know, the senior populations who are really setting out to do the right thing. Are they going to be caught out later on with an expensive battery, which they, you know, on the finite pension are unable to afford? That my concern is genuinely that it's the vulnerable people who want to do the right thing by, you know, going into new technologies, who are often left in financial sort of disabled. So yeah, that's my that's my sort of, I just have concerns about it and I don't have an answer. Yeah, thank you.
Quinn, and over to David for the next question.
Just before I ask the question, I would say that some of the points you've raised, Quinn, are things that we wrestle with at the Climate Forum, and where we try and bring together research that we can find and publish it on our website. So some of these things, obviously our knowledge is evolving as we discover more about them. And it's not, as you say, it's black and white, but we are learning more about this, and we're trying to publish this with accurate scientific information. Anyway, so my next question is not particularly about Golden Bay, but we do know that you Golden Bay people are very sensible. That's why we want you on the council. And so your voice in the council chamber is really important. And so this question relates to what I call urban sprawl. And so this is most evident in the Waimea Plains. And in fact, the intersection at Lower Queen Street is currently the most traffic heavy intersection in New Zealand. The most traffic heavy intersection in New Zealand. So you can wait in the rush hour, you can wait there for 30 minutes in a really busy time. This is what we're creating. So I'm going to ask the combined common sense of Golden Bay to help us address some of the problem that's essentially in the Waimea Plains, and not fortunately yet in Golden Bay. So my question is this. We know that urban intensification actually can help reduce carbon emissions, less commuting. And the council's future development strategy, recently published, instead provides for more large housing subdivisions on agricultural land. What will you specifically do to make intensified urban housing a more attractive reality? So we greeny people say, well, you know, squeeze up in towns, but what would you do to make it a more attractive reality? Some intensification. So I'm going to ask Celia for the answer to that one, please.
Okay. There's been a huge amount of debate about the future development strategy. I understand that, and the first comment I'd make is that agricultural land is not the same as highly productive land. So there is agricultural land, but there's not a huge amount of really, really highly productive land. Not so that's just a point that I'd like to start with. I think the principle of having everybody living in town is a sort of an easy one to adopt, but I think that we just need to be very careful that we don't slip into dogma over this. Some of you will be aware that Tasman District Council did develop some modelling for emissions in relation to satellite villages that could be set up under the future development strategy, and that these are no worse on emissions than having everybody living in town, because villages, if they're self-contained and where there is just a 20-minute walk or a short walk to facilities, that can actually be less emissions than when people are in a bigger town situation where they are more inclined to drive because it's not, the public transport is perhaps not so convenient. So all I'm saying is that I think we have to be very scrupulous about how we look at these ideas, and I don't think that putting everybody into town is necessarily the answer. We have people who come to the top of the south or to the Tasman region because they want to be able to live in a more open situation. And we do have to have regard for that. It's not feasible to try and corral people into a living situation that they don't want. Having said that, of course, we must have more intensification in town, and zoning is important for that. Building standards, urban design, all those things need to be put together in a package, because it hasn't worked to just allow people to subdivide or to just build a flat or a couple of flats on a large section, because sometimes they're poor quality and they're not very nice to live in, and they don't have any garden, and people don't always like them. So I think the future development strategy has tried to balance things. I appreciate that there is a view that it's not in sufficient intensification, and I can agree with that to a point, but I do also see that there could be another way forward where self-contained small villages are built where people actually don't have to go to the town.
Time's up. Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Sorry, a bit long.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you. Quinn, what's your response to this about how we could make intensified urban housing a more attractive option? And I think here probably Richmond rather than Collingwood.
Yeah, I actually did apply this more to the Golden Bay area than
Yeah, that's all right.
So, but I'm not wholly convinced in this geographical region, meaning over here, that urban intensification is the magic solution to cutting, kilometres per person. And what I have been experiencing myself with local people in the last 2 years in particular, and even more so recently because fuel prices have gone up, is that communities are intensifying their efforts to create connections locally and relying more on each other in their suburban hubs and sharing resources of shopping and socializing and doing a lot more in their local areas with the goal of living more sustainably because of needs must. That has been quite successful. There's a very good local carpooling or ride sharing thing that's flicking up stuff every day. And mostly people will say, well, I'm going here, I'm going to Blenheim, I'm going to Richmond, I'm off to Motueka, and usually they don't end up, going alone, but they take sort of one or two people. So that kind of thing has definitely been increasing. And we haven't sort of seen that in my lifetime, but it's the kind of thing that my grandparents used to talk about, where they really did have strong neighbourhood networks and, bulk buying and resource sharing and tools and skills and child minding and, that kind of thing. And that has been increasing in the last couple of years. And it's lovely. It's really lovely. Personally, I do see a real problem with affordable housing in Tākaka or in this area. There are always people who, families even with young kids, and it's really, it's quite distressing. I would love to see more initiatives that could be focused intergenerationally around communities on pieces of land, similar to what we've got happening down in town on the Mahana Street corner with, can't think of what it's called right now, but it's called the Affordable Housing Project, that's right, and the co-housing. So we're certainly thinking along the right lines. I know that some people find council very difficult to be able to invest in having, I could do it here, you know, except for I'm not zoned for another dwelling on the property, but there are certainly many of us who would love to be able to share our place if we could only, you know, afford the expense of going through the council regulations. So yeah, I don't know if I even answered the question, but that anyway.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, James, what's your thoughts on this problem?
Well, it is one that concerns me greatly, but it's one that we have to take very seriously. I mean, obviously, I say coming to Golden Bay is a lifestyle choice. I was quite happily living and working in Nelson, and I would have stayed there until the day I retired. However, the practicality of actually travelling from Golden Bay to Nelson, as you would know, would be totally impractical. So I chose, this is how serious I am about the problem, I chose to live in a car park for 6 days and travel nowhere so that I could do my work. Now, with regard to intensification, I think there should be an incentive for those that say live in the TDC area to actually live and work in the TDC area. And I mean, people, to actually just tell people that or legislate about it, it isn't going to happen. But if you offer an incentive, say for someone that owns a home in Richmond, if they work in Richmond also, maybe to have a rate rebate would encourage them to do so, and therefore you would reduce the travelling. The biggest times you see travelling around the TDC is at school times and work times, first thing in the morning and from 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Now that's self-explanatory with regard to people being on the road. I mean, back in our days, we would either walk, catch a bus or go on a bike to school. This is not the case anymore. It's very common to see, you know, a mother with the children in the car. In fact, I think 8 out of 10, this is how they do. But getting back to the housing problem, it has to be something that is encouraged in the urban areas. I think to live and work, I think that is a great way forward, reducing emissions at the same time. But also when you talk about releasing land, etc., we shouldn't just limit and look at agricultural. We have to look at all things, whether it be agricultural, horticulture, forestry, whatever land is available and is practical as a viable solution, we should seriously look at. If you coming in from Motueka, you have a look at the emissions in the valley, and this is all from industry. On a light morning, on a summer's day, you'll see like a light smog. Now, this is not Los Angeles. This is not a Chinese city. This is not emissions. This is from industry and fires along with everything else. And I don't think it's a healthy outlook, not for the people that live there or for the people who work there. But it is something that we have. We generate so much in our TDC area with regard to horticulture, with fruit, we do it with agriculture, with as in dairy farming, and we produce a lot of food that goes all over the world. And usually it's a lot cheaper the other side of the world than it is when it's grown on the farm at source. So we have to look seriously at all that we're doing, and are we just playing along with the money? And some businesses that make a lot of money out of it, and then here we are, the average Joe ratepayer. You know, we're expected to not just pick up our end, but we're obviously being asked the hard yards at how we're going to solve the problems. We are willing as citizens, candidates, constituents, whatever, to do exactly this. And I would ask anyone to look at it.
Thank you. Very good point. Thank you. I'll just give you a small piece of information. You may know this already, that the government is paying businesses who are willing to convert their boilers from carbon-based to other fuels. So one of the largest grants in New Zealand was paid to the Waimea glass houses, which is what the largest glass house in the South Island, until now heated by coal. Now, thanks to a multi-million-dollar government subsidy, is going to be converted, and under the current settings of this government. Anyway, enough of that. So Joanna's going to give you a question on biodiversity, I think.
I was just going to ask you if you might do that question.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay,
I'll do the next one.
Yes. Okay, fine. So So you are in Golden Bay, close by the Kahurangi Park, and also not so too far from the Abel Tasman Park, which are all part of our wonderful natural heritage. But this is a question about the Tasman District Council and what they could do better. So when you're on the council and thinking about what they could do better, I'd like you to comment on what particular innovation you think the council should undertake to improve the quality of biological diversity on council land, or including on estuaries and watercourses and this sort of thing, but things that the council could actually make a difference on, please. So I'm going to ask Quinn if you could give us your thoughts on a biodiversity initiative, a specific initiative that the council could do to improve the conditions for biodiversity on council land. Thank you.
Well, recently we've had some local projects that have been receiving practical levels of funding, where previously they've relied on solely on passionate volunteers. And we have the most incredible volunteers and projects, and so many skilled people here doing all sorts of things, you know, Project Divine, for example, and the Farming 2030, which is on a local Wayne Langford's property. Now we've got a project happening out on the Fairwells, but it's just, there's been the Motopipi planting. I mean, it's just incredible what we've got going on here. Now, we've also got very few jobs available, and I don't know how it can be done, but, you know, I would love to see people who are out of work or new to the workforce or returning to work, you know, school leavers, training and actually being paid to do some of the larger projects in the council sort of jurisdictions, and actually employ people and then train them to lead projects. And I can't think of a better way to learn and study and work, and being outside and doing this kind of work. I think, you know, it's a priority, but it seems to be a priority conditional to the work being done by volunteers. But I would love to actually see it being, you know, really recognised and acknowledged for what it is. Yeah, I'd like to see creation of employment funding for these projects. Yep.
Thank you. What an interesting idea. Thank you very much for that. So, James, what would you do on this conservation and improving the opportunities here? On what innovative ideas have you got, please?
Well, the first thing I think, because it's not my strongest subject, so I have to be honest on that, but I would continue, from what I understand, to support Council's current plans and the initiatives with regard to biodiversity, particularly along the Bryant Ecological District report, which was drafted up recently with local ideas and initiatives. And as you rightly said, we have two of the biggest national parks here, being the Abel Tasman and the Kahurangi, and they are a treasure in itself, Kahurangi being the second biggest national park in New Zealand, I understand. But I think there are a lot of initiatives talking to the farmers, etc., with regarding biodiversity and SNAs and things like that. Those people talking with the councils on how best to, the consultation rather than confrontation approach is always the best way forward. And I think we're probably doing better than some would give us credit for in those areas. And so my main thing at this stage is, I believe with the council's plans that are already in place, I would continue to support them and encourage new initiatives along the way.
Thank you. Celia, what's your thoughts on this?
Yes, I'm going to talk about forests. Tasman District Council has quite extensive commercial forestry assets. One of them, Kingsland Forest, has been taken out of commercial operation and is being, part of it is being returned to native bush, which will be, you know, a native, permanent native forest absorbs more carbon than plantation forestry. And I don't want to get into a debate about the issue of plantation forests and absorption of carbon, but I would like to see Tasman District Council's forests, some of them have parts of them become turned into permanent native cover, and this would be a project which would have to review, where we'd have to review all the existing forests and determine what the opportunities are for this to happen. So that, I think that is probably the main thing that I would say. The other possibility is that the council reserves, there is council land all over the place, and I appreciate that because I'm on council I do have this knowledge, and so I think please everybody take this into consideration, that the other two candidates are not on council, so they don't have this sort of knowledge. So you know, but the reserves, council has reserves all over the place, and I would like to see a percentage of those reserves become native, permanent, go into permanent native forest, or shrubs or whatever, because there are too many rhododendrons around in our reserves. And we also, under the policy statement for Indigenous biodiversity, we're going to have a percentage of our land in significant natural areas anyway. So that's the other point.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to move to another question now. But Joanne is going to ask it, but go ahead, please, Joanna.
Okay. This question's on adaptation, and points out that scientists report that coastal inundation will occur in Tasman district a good deal sooner than expected, especially with the recent findings on land subsidence increasing effectively sea level rise. So what further specific actions should council take in the light of this somewhat more urgent need for the timing of adaptation? And for this question, we'll start with James, or I think you call yourself Jim. Do you are you called Jim?
Been called worse, so you can call me James, Jim, Jimmy, whatever you like.
Righto. Go ahead.
Now, well, there's a couple of things here I think are worth looking at. I mean, the challenges within our district in Golden Bay are possibly with our coasts. It's probably even more pressing than some in the TDC, but there are other areas of concern that I can acknowledge. I think it's something that concerns us all to the degree where, okay, we can admit and we're aware of changes that are taking place, but what are we doing in order to protect the areas that we've got? In some areas, there has been very little. There's been too much debate and not enough action. I think this is the kind of thing that's got to change. I understand that with regard to the Pakawao seawall, for instance, they are, I don't know whether it's general knowledge yet, but I understand that they are going to go ahead and build the south side of it, but they're going to let the north side go for whatever reason. There's no plans to carry on. I would actually go back to the contractor that may have been awarded that and say, hey, look, can we come to the table and form an agreement? Let's sort this out in weeks or a few months, not years, and see whether we can do the whole thing to actually solve this problem for that area once and for all. Now, the same thing goes everywhere else. We're all concerned with erosion. We're all concerned with weather changes. What can we do to change the weather? What can we really do? We know that it's all, climate change is all driven by what we're told with CO2 gases and whatever. I would refer to go back to what I mentioned earlier about the film that I would recommend everyone to look at, because we can change the environment. We can do it in a few years and not 50 years. We all have these ideas with, okay, what are we going to do by 2050 with our targets and zero, etc. It's a long way to get there. If we get there and we've still got it wrong, then that to me is not acceptable or good enough. We actually have to start this tomorrow, which is one reason why I support the 2042 Mahua project, which both Celia and Quinn was involved in. That tells you not only what we're doing, how we're doing, and what we can do better. We have to embrace these local initiatives along with anything else that we feel will be a benefit, not just to this region, but the entire country. We're quite innovative within Golden Bay. I understand we've got the highest amount of PhDs per head of capita in the country. Let's get our heads together. Let's lead, not just for our region, but let's lead with a plan into the future that can benefit the whole country, and who knows, maybe the world.
Thank you. Thank you, James. On to Celia, the question about coastal inundation and council actions.
This is tricky. For a start, I think that council should take a hard line on people not being able to build by the coast anymore, and people do still want to build. They want to build batches, and I think that this is I think we just have to bite the bullet and say that people shouldn't be able to build close to the coast. Is that will involve some zoning changes, possibly, but it essentially comes down to the consents that are given. There is a coastal environment which has been mapped out, and consents within the coastal, if people want to build within the coastal environment, they do have to get a resource consent, and so that is pretty tricky, and where people are wanting to build where it's low lying, for example at places like Toshra Avenue out near Pakawa, would you believe people still want to build houses there? So that would be one thing, using regulation. The other thing is taking account of the need for species to move inland. I suppose you would call it species retreat. So in estuaries, particularly where the land adjoining the estuary is very low lying, there will be a change, and some of that those species and that shoreline will move inland. And I think, even though it seems like a long way away, we have to be thinking about this now. Often it's farmland, and I think we have to find a way to reserve that land for species to move in. As far as protection of houses which are already close to the sea and which are at risk of being undermined, I think we have to choose the best option there to protect them. Sometimes doing sand push-ups will work, and sometimes there will need to be something harder, such as rock or other sorts of things like wooden walls or something, which I don't like. I would prefer for hard protection. I think rock is better. It does give little places for penguins to nest. So I'm just, my view on that is that in certain situations, and we have to consider each situation on its merits as to what protection, if any, is needed.
Thank you, Celia. And to Quinn on this same question.
So I've had very similar thoughts to the other two participants already. And one of the things which I've had some conversations with people along residents along Pahara Beach, dog walking, which, you know, you meet all the best people out dog walking, and you know, the two gentlemen who, I think one's probably in his 80s now and the other one not much younger, who every time the sea comes in and on a full moon and takes out their steps, you know, they get out there and they doggedly replace it and they make it stronger than before. And I've had so many conversations with people frustrated and just wondering why something can't be done to stop this increased erosion, which is what, you know, what we've sort of just been talking about. And people just want something done and they just want an answer. That's not talking about people's personal property, but as far as personal property, Sharon actually on the call last night, she had some thoughts about, you know, let's lift some of these places up and move them back, and that, you know, that's what we have to do, sort of thing. So there's that kind of option. And then because I spent most of my life in Wellington, of course, when they put the airport in, the Wellington airport, and they were international, they had to preserve that investment. And so they put massive boulders all around to Evans Bay, and then had to do the same on the Lower Bay side. And they're massive, but they do the job and they're doing it well, and they last for a very long time. So what I would like to see is do something to preserve the ones which we already have given consents to. We're already taking rates from people. We have a responsibility, I feel, to be a good landlord to people who, you know, who have had those properties already. And then, you know, as Celia pointed out, let's not get ourselves into that position again. But could we be bolder in getting onto things now and actually doing something which is going to last the test of time and increases in damage from these rising seas? Yeah, that's all I've really got to add. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Back to you, David.
Right. Okay. My friend Dave Tinker sent me a question, which is quite a good one. He's unfortunately left the chat. There's no excuse for that, but nevertheless, I'm going to read out his question. He said, could we ask candidates to give a summary of their key reasons for standing for council and where environmental and climate fit into their scale of important issues? So I think that's not a bad question. So why are you standing, and where does environment and climate fit? Everything can't be number one. I understand that. So I would love to hear you on that point. And I would like to ask Celia, please. You've been a councillor and you're standing again. It's very generous. Why are you standing again? And where does environmental things, where do they fit on your scale of, you know, what's really important? There are many other things I know that you're concerned with.
Well, I'll be honest and say I'm standing again because I've only just figured it all out. It's taken me 3 years to figure it all out.
Very good.
But one of the reasons I'm standing again is because environment and climate change are really to the fore of what interests and concerns me. And I've seen over this term that I've already been in that climate change and protection of biodiversity has gone from being virtually unheard of or not mentioned in council to becoming well on the way to becoming central to council's dealings and policies. In fact, I would say that climate change, reduction of emissions and adaptation are on everybody's minds when they're talking about policy or any issues really at all. What should we do here? What should we do there? This always comes into it, and that I think that is very heartening, and I think it's a good sign for the future. And so the environment is foremost for me as well. And it was quite interesting talking to David Ogilvie, who's not going to be standing this time, but has been on council off and on since about 1980. And he described how that when the first Tasman Resource Management Plan was written in the early 2000s after the RMA came in, that he and Dennis Bush-King and Steve Markham were lone operators doing this Tasman Resource Management Plan, which seemed to be pretty much of no interest whatsoever to the rest of the council. So we've come a long way from that, and I think environment is now becoming central as well, and that's why I want to have another round.
That sounds very exciting. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you, Quinn, now, please. Tell me, why are you standing, and where does environment and climate change fit in your list of things?
Well, I'm standing because it just seems to be how I do life, really. I was, the class representative, and I was in leadership and management in all of my roles. And it's just, I seem to be attracted to making a difference. And that's really why I'm standing. I want to be able to, I'm also very, I love learning, and I'm very curious about how things operate. So for me, I wanted to get more involved, and it's a massive, very steep learning curve. I'm thrilled to bits with how much I've been able to learn just in the last sort of, couple of months. So it's great, regardless of what happens. I've really enjoyed the process, and it's been, it's given me all sorts of ideas and areas to pursue and get into more. And as far as, so the next part of the question was, how does climate action fit in my my priority list? Well, you just can't have an unhealthy environment, or an environment which is being seriously impacted by climate, and healthy people. And for me, it's all connected. You can't we have to all work together, and we have to look at all of the issues, mental health and human connectedness and the environment, and we have to deal with everything and address everything appropriately. We can't, the issues are not separate in my mind. It's all connected. So yeah, thank you
very much. Thank you. James, just before I ask you, you mentioned earlier about the fact that that there are some big countries on the planet, not least India and China, who are heavy emitters. And of course, this is a strategic issue for New Zealand. But the view here of the government is that we have to do our bit. We have to play our bit, and we have to try and influence those other countries too, where we can. But having said that, I would like to just ask you to say something about your reason for standing and where you would place environmental and climate things on your list of priorities.
Very happy to, David. I think I just want to address the last thing you said with regard to us doing our bit. I don't think we should just do our bit. I think we have the ability to lead the world on that, and I am passionate about it. From my perspective, reasons why I'm standing, I think I have a practical knowledge. Number one, from being brought up on a farm, so I know how things used to be done. from, you know, the late 50s right the way through. And I've actually finished my career still being involved in that sector. And so I've had the advantage of traveling from not just all over the world. I have also had the ability that I travel on a weekly basis between Bluff and Cape Reinga. And many places I get to see that you guys would never get to see publicly. So that gives me an advantage. But not just that, it's with regard to the environment and the climate, I see and I monitor and I hear what people's concerns. It's not just about what I think, it's more actually what they think. And as I think I said to you earlier, having the ability with 2 ears and 1 mouth and use them in that proportion says a lot in regard that if you listen with food before you go talking, you can actually embrace a lot more things. When we talk about environment, I mean, one of the things I think Celia brought it up with council land and native bush. Do you realise, I know it's a controversial subject, but if we were to produce hemp as an alternative crop in Golden Bay or in the Tasman district, they are 25 times more efficient than forestry trees or native bush in helping reduce those emissions in the atmosphere. I would say that we would have to go more than that. It's not just about looking at what else we can do. It's about, okay, could we process that product? What can we turn it into? How many uses have it got? And I attended a local hemp hui here recently. And one of the things that they brought up was that you can actually eat it. You can eat the seeds, you can process, you can feed it to animals, you can turn it into structural material, and it's got many, many uses. Unfortunately, a lot of things that we get to deal with, say from a farm with it being milk, that only get produced into milk powder or cheese, and forestry is in there.
Time's up, James, I'm sorry.
No problem.
We're just getting into the throw of things. So would any member of the public, would Martin or Barbara like to ask a question? If you would, you could stick up your hand or type something in, do so. And over to you, Joanna. Is there another question you'd like to put to the panel beyond our list so far?
Yes, I'll put the cat among the pigeons again.
Please, go ahead. The cat. Yes, this is the operative word, guys. Beware.
Yeah, beware. It's a controversial question, but highly relevant to our level.
We will have a question after us from Barbara. She stuck her hand up, so I can see.
Okay, so let's be strict on the time for answering this one so that we get Barbara's question in. Okay, this question is, what are your views on establishing a cat control policy? And we would start with Quinn on this one. That's tough, Quinn, because you haven't had much time to think about it. But anyway, off we go with Quinn on cat control.
Yeah, look, it's really tricky. One of my dearest friends in Golden Bay is a cat protection lady, and she protects cats. And she has been teaching me, cats are not my thing. You've seen my dog. I like dogs. I like cats, but I'm a dog person. She has been teaching me that if you raise your cat from a kitten and you play with it, there's certain things that you can do which will mean that the cat is not going to be a predator. And so that's good. I have cats, I live in the bush, and I have cats who come from neighbouring properties, and I've got ducks and I've got, birds and things, and they are predating at night because I can go out and see their eyes shining across the lake, things like that. So would I look, I don't know. I personally would hate to see people having to have their cats contained full time. That would be really upsetting for a cat lover. It would be, very upsetting for me. I don't know. Look, the jury's out on that one. I don't have an answer.
That's all right, Quinn. And I'm going to suggest being even tougher and just giving a minute for the other two people. I hope you won't mind, because Helen also has a question. Okay, so we go to Jim Katz. 1
Okay.
minute.
Yeah, look, I love all animals, but I think like with all animals comes a serious responsibility. So I've had cats most of my life, but what I do is I train them in a way where they are never allowed to predate. I think if they enter into the area of a predator, they also become vermin. But I love my cats probably more than most people love dogs. I've got cats inside this house right now that are not even mine. They come from the neighbours. But my responsibility to cat owners is this: at night, be responsible and keep your cat in. Do not let it roam, do not let it predate. Cats sleep notoriously 17, 18 hours a day. And I've always trained my cats like a dog. They're on a lead, they're microchipped, they're everything, but they're never allowed to predate on forestry, bird or anything else. I take it very seriously.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Jim. And to Celia.
Yeah, I'd like to see cats having to be microchipped, so that if cats, feral cats, appear, in the bush or whatever, if they don't have a microchip, then that means that they're predominantly eating native animals or birds to exist, to live, because they're probably not being fed. So that would be my thing, and I totally agree with that. We need public education to keep cats inside at night.
Excellent. Okay, thank you all for that one. Over to David, and let's hope we can get both of our audience questions in.
I'm going to ask Barbara first to unmute and read it and just speak to a question, if you'd like to do that.
Yes, hello, here everybody. I have a simple question, and I would like to know your views as counselor. Would you be advocating, supporting, and leveraging the Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or the global goals? And if so, how would you do that? Thank you.
That's a tough question. Okay, who would like to have a go at that? The Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, they cover a range of things, of the care of the planet and the sustainability of people and biological diversity in it. So, James, do you think we should be using these sort of things more than we are? What's your view about committing to that?
I'm really serious about committing to that. I mean, I've spoken earlier on about the 2042 Mahua strategy. That's a sustainable regenerative ideas. Both my colleagues here, Celia and Quinn, were both involved in the addition to making that. That is something that is local. That is something that can go from district to nationwide, and I believe we should look at ourselves first before we can embrace everything else that goes along from outside on a global scale. Yes, I acknowledge the fact we have to listen and act on that also, but with what we've already got and what has been proposed, I think we are realistically on a road to achieving better than we have in the past.
Thank you. So 1 minute on that. Would you give us your thoughts, Celia, please? Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes, 1 minute. I think that a large amount of what we are already doing contribute to the United Nations Sustainable Goals. I would like to maybe see them referenced more in the work that TDC will be doing to formulate the Tasman Environment Plan. So I think it's very, very important, and I think a lot of it we're doing anyway.
Thanks. Quinn, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with the two last speakers. And the only thing I would like to add is that we are, we as a community and also as a country, we are leading from within and leading upwards. And I feel as though, you know, we are, once we are cementing this and gaining more momentum and moving towards it, then we can step up even further and do some of the bigger items. But I think we're making a terrific start from within our communities, and the massive project that was done locally here, the Maho 2042, it's so comprehensive and it has terrific buy-in from people. You know, people are talking about it and referencing it, and yeah, it was I think it's been a fantastic place to, you know, move through from. Yeah.
Thank you.
You'll be happy to know that Mohua 2042 is working with the Tasman Climate Forum. We're kind of working in partnership.
Yep.
And so, David, can we get Helen's question in?
Yes, the best question for last. Over to you, Helen. Unmute, please. You need to unmute down at the bottom left. Bottom left of your screen, probably.
Who's the admin on there? Can you do it for her? Because you can do it from
It froze. Sorry, it froze.
Oh, okay.
I beg your pardon for delaying. Look, I've got a little bit of a preamble here. In that my view on climate change is that it's a crisis, and that even the Paris goals are that we've signed up to are not going to do enough. So we've all got to be in this. And my other conviction is that it's really hard for individuals. Quinn, you've pointed that out with the dilemma about lithium and environmental issues with electric cars. That it's really hard for individuals to do all the research, and I'm grateful for the Climate Forum for helping to do that, to know what's right. But it is up to councils and central government to know, to research and to take the best advice and to know what's right. So my question is about dairying and particularly as a Golden Bay issue. And I admit that I still eat dairy. I'm maybe trying to reduce a little bit, but I still eat dairy. But that the regenerative agriculture pastoral solution, I have not seen the movie. I will look at it, but I'm not convinced at the moment that regenerative practices will solve this problem, can reverse this problem. I don't think they can, from the reading I've done. But I will look at the movie. So what, if you were on council, what would be your attitude to say new applications for permits for dairy farms? Because I think one can't easily reverse, and it's the livelihood of a lot of Golden Bay people. But what would be the attitude to new developments of dairy farms and for big irrigation and taking water for that, and for polluting the water?
Thank you. That's an important question. Quinn, could you tell us what you would do? You're on the council and you're discussing a resource consent for dairying.
Yeah, look, I don't have enough information. I mean, if I was on council, I would have access to different information. But what I do know is that because I've done some training with Integrity Soils, and so we looked at the old grazing practices, you know, from the plains, basically from buffalo type thing, you know, herds, and how that was healthier for the land than some of the practices that we have gone into. So and that made beautiful sense to me. And don't ask me to explain it perfectly now, because, you know, it was a 2.5 years ago that I did that work. And the other thing too is we've recently lost, in the last 12 months, if not less, actually, 3 dairy farms from Golden Bay. So, and for different reasons. Yeah, I would need to do more research. I'd have to really look at that on a case-by-case basis. And I certainly don't, even though I have some training, I don't have enough experience to make that call. But yeah, certainly, you know, it could become quite a big issue, as you say. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks. Celia, what's your response to this one? Obviously, behind a dairy farm is a lot of methane emissions, which are very destructive, more so than carbon dioxide in many ways.
Yes, so you don't need to apply to set up a dairy farm. You can just make a dairy farm if you want to. But you do have to get a resource consent for irrigation to take water, and that's, you can't really have any sort of intensification on a dairy farm in eastern Golden Bay, probably without some irrigation. And so much more stricter controls on permits or consents for irrigation, I think, are a no-brainer, really. So I'm completely in support of being very, very rigorous around irrigation applications, looking at the soil type as to how permeable the soil is. Is it in the recharge zone for the Arthur Marble Aquifer, and that type of thing. But I would make the comment that being on council, I do know that the numbers of dairy farms, as Quinn has said, are actually decreasing across the whole region. And so there is, you know, less intensification as well. I don't think we're going to see intensification of dairying again. The peak for that has passed.
Time's up.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
James, what's your approach on this one?
My approach, I agree with the other 2 candidates with regard to there is a small decrease in the dairy farms. However, it's not just about the number, it's about how good are they, how big are they. I have got to see dairy farms all over New Zealand. And looking at the ones that we have in Golden Bay, I can tell you, without naming and shaming the ones who are not, Golden Bay as an area is pretty good on an overall national standard. However, that doesn't mean to say we're perfect. If you have a look at some of the other things with regard to water, I was speaking with a local guy recently who told me that with regard to water, he had created his own reservoir, dam, whatever, and he could produce 10 times the amount of cubic meters cheaper than the Waimea Dam is going to do for the horticulture. But he had to pay for it himself. Now that's a considerable amount of money. The thing that really disappoints me as a nation is that I believe between 95% plus of all the water that falls on this country goes out to sea. Now I see that as a huge loss, because in many places here we are, you know, having people having to apply for consents in order to harness something that we feel should all be free, and yet most of it as a great resource is wasted. I feel that is a crime in itself.
Time's up, James, sorry.
No problem.
Important question, and we've touched on it only, so thank you everybody. So I'm going to thank you all for joining this session, and we're going to bring it to a conclusion with a karakia, but just to remind you that we will have a recording of it on our website. So is there anything you've said you wish you hadn't, you'll be able to hear it again. Thank you very, very much for making the time, and I'd like to hand over to you, Joanna.
Okay, this closing karakia is one that marks work well done together, which I think is fair enough for this meeting tonight. And the metaphor is we've just been paddling a waka together on the sea, and we've landed on the beach, and we pause to reflect on what we've done together. Ko te hā, ko te pō, ko tangaroa, ko te mana, ko te kotahitanga o ngā mata waka. Haumi e, hui e, tai ki e.
Ai, ki e.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody.
Kia ora.
Thank
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.